Welcome to this video about creating web apps with ArcGIS. Now for the demos today, I'm going to be using ArcGIS Online, but these workflows are just as applicable if you're using ArcGIS Enterprise instead. Now over the course of this video, I'm going to show you a couple of different ways to publish data. One of those is by publishing from ArcGIS Pro. The other one is by loading a spreadsheet directly into ArcGIS Online. We're then going to use that data to create a map and look through some of the symbology options. And we'll finish off by looking at how that map can be shared through either a web application or a dashboard. So let's get started with the publishing from Pro experience. Now this is the crime data we were using in my other video, so if you're interested in understanding this in a little bit more detail, then please do check that out. But for now, I just want to take this data, publish it to ArcGIS Online. Now I haven't done any symbology here, because I'm going to do that in the online environment. So to share this, I go up to my sharing menu, and I've got a couple of options here. I could share the entire map, or I can just choose to share the data. So I'm going to do that. So I click to share web layer, go over to my sharing pane, and I can give this a title, and I can provide a summary and some tags. And then I can choose, well, where in my ArcGIS Online account do I want to save it? There are some sharing options at the bottom here, but my recommendation is that you don't select those for now. Wait until you've finished your final application and then share everything at that point. The final step is to analyze this data because I want to validate there's no problems. So the good news is there's no errors, but it has picked up a couple of warnings, and I can expand this and I can see that it's telling me that the world topographic map and the hillshade are unsupported data for publishing. That's fine because that's the base map. We don't want to publish that. We only want to publish the crime information, so we can ignore those and then choose to publish this as a data service. Now I've already done that, so let's just swap over to ArcGIS Online and see what that looks like. So as you can see here, we've got the crime data. It's created a surface definition and a feature layer, and the feature layer is what we'd use to create our map. Before we do that, I want to show you the second approach for loading data, which would be to import a spreadsheet. Now for that, we choose to click New Item. I'm going to load some data from my device. I can navigate to the CSV that I want to load. And at this point, we want to create a hosted feature layer. So we don't want to just load the CSV. We do want to create a geographic data set we can use in our map. It's then going to analyze that CSV to try and pick out all the different fields that are in this data. So you can see it's picked up all those really great attributes, and it's worth at this point validating that the data is coming through in the way that you expect. Next step is to choose, well, how do I want to locate my information? So the good news is this spreadsheet already has a long and a lat in it, so we can use that. If you don't have that, then you can use an address geocoder, but please note that may consume, it will consume credits. So you need to be mindful of the amount of data you're loading, and there might be more efficient techniques. Click Next, and it's asking us to give this a name, so we'll call it Hearts Crimes. Give it some tags as usual, and we'll save that. And what it's now doing is it's loading that CSV into the ArcGIS Online environment and converting that into a feature service that we can then use to create our map. So it's going to open up the details page where we can see that it's now created the service, and we can go straight into the map creation. What I'd like to do now is create a map from this data. So for that, I can choose to open this data set in the map viewer. And then this is going to open up the environment where we can start configuring that data to look and feel the way we wish. So the first step is to choose, well, what base map am I interested in using for this map? So we can see at the moment we're using the topographic, but there are a variety of other data sets that are available in ArcGIS Online. If you notice these beginning with GB, these are using a British National Grid coordinate system and are based on open data from Ordnance Survey. So please be mindful of the coordinate system of your data and try and match it with an appropriate base map. I'm fairly happy with the base map we've got, so I'm going to leave that as is and focus on changing the way the data is displayed. Now at the moment it's just a red dot. Now we could edit that layer style so that we've got a slightly different symbol, and there's lots of style options here. You've got a variety of different color schemes, sizes, different symbol types. There's a whole load of gallery options for you to choose from. But what I want to do is I want to symbolize this based on the crime type. So for that, I'm going to choose to add a field, and we'll choose crime type. Click add, and what you'll notice is the symbology options have now changed. So it's already given us a default color scheme, and I can go in and edit that if I so wish. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time changing colors. I'll leave that for you to experiment with. But the one thing I do want to do is perhaps change the size of those symbols. So I can edit this to perhaps adjust that to be 5. So we can now see that those symbols stand out a little bit more. If I click on any of these features, then we can then see we get a pop-up which gives us details of the underlying attributes. Now this can also be configured, so it might be that some of these fields you don't want to be on display. So there's a couple of options over on the right hand side even, which we can use. So the first is to adjust the names of the fields. So it might be, for example, crime date, there's no space there, so we can start adding spaces in just to make it a little bit more readable. The other option is to configure the pop-up, which allows us to choose, well, which fields do we actually want to be displayed. So it might be that I don't really need to include the long and the lat because that's not important. So I can remove those and it will adjust the pop-up to reflect that change. So it is important when you're creating these maps to ensure it's as usable as possible for the person that's going to be using it as part of their workflows. Now at the moment we've symbolized the data. We can start to see a little bit of the types of crimes in any given area. I've updated the pop-up so it's a little bit more readable, but it's still a little bit unclear as to where the hotspots of activity are. So I'm going to go to my options over on the right hand side here, and there's an aggregation option, and I can choose to do clustering. So very similar to the approach I showed in the Pro environment, where we can cluster the data so we can pick out trends across this area. So at the moment, it's showing us the larger the symbol, the more the number of crimes. It's also giving us a count of crimes in that area, and the color denotes the predominant crime type in that location. So if we look at the legend here, we can see that red is reflecting violence and sexual offences, so we can see that there's various hotspots of that sort of crime. As I zoom in, the clustering is dynamic, so we get more and more detail as we zoom into the map, and we can start picking out, well, where are there violent crime locations, where are there criminal damage locations, and where might we see large amounts of shoplifting. So clustering for me is a really great way of representing the data, so it's a little bit easier to interpret and understand. I'm now going to zoom out to the extent of my data, and I'm happy that this map reflects the data in the way I want to convey it. So I'm now going to save this. And now we've done that, we are ready to go on to the next stage, which will be creating applications from this map. The first application I'd like to show you is Instant Apps. Now the various different application options are available on the left hand side here, where we can choose to create an app. Now Instant Apps are very quick, very easy, and a great place to start if you're creating apps for the first time. Experience Builder provides a lot more creative control, but requires a little bit more skill to make the most of. Story maps allow you to convey the data with a narrative. So if you want to explain the data, talk through your analysis, then story maps are a good option for that. And finally, at the bottom here, we've got dashboards, which I'll show a little bit later, which are around adding charts and graphs to make that data come to life. But we're going to start with Instant Apps, so let's choose that, and we'll go into the configuration options. Now the first stage in many ways is the most complicated because there are so many different templates to choose from, it's difficult to know where to start. So to help with that, we provided a variety of questions on the left hand side here which help narrow down those options. So we want to allow viewers to interact with my data. We're going to maybe we want to add some filters, doesn't include time-based data. So it's now dropped that down to just 5 choices. The one I'm going to choose is sidebar, but if you're ever uncertain whether you're making the right choice, you can preview the application before committing. So this is giving me a feel for, well, what's this application going to look like once it's finished? And then if I'm happy that that choice makes sense, I can then go to the choose option at the bottom and start configuring this app. So we'll give this a title and go into the configuration. Now, as I said before, Instant Apps are really easy. It's just a 6-step process to create our final application. And what I really like is as we make configuration changes, we can always see what the final application is going to look like because we get a preview on the right hand side. So the first step is to choose our map. Now we've already done that, but you could start the Instant App process without a map and then choose that at a later date. Stage 2 is to give the app a title. So I'm going to call this Crime Viewer. Stage 3 is to choose, well, which configuration options do I want, what tools do I want to be available. So at the moment, we've got a legend, we've got details of the map, and we've got the pop-up. Now, I didn't actually document any details of this map, so this panel is pretty much unnecessary. But what I would like to add is a layer list, because it might be that individuals want to turn the layer on and off if necessary. They might want to look at the background context detail. When I'm happy I've chosen my tools, I then go next. Here we can choose the configuration of our search bar. Now the first choice is, well, do we want a search bar at all? Do people need to search against data or addresses? And then do I want it to be open at the start? And then finally we can choose from a range of different geocoders that we can be looking up addresses. Now the World Geocoder is a great place to start because that provides addressing for not only the whole of the UK but the globe. Next step is to choose my color theme, so we can switch between light and dark, and then there's some preset themes which will adjust the colors. I quite like the street one, but you can always create your own templates within ArcGIS Online to reflect your corporate branding if you so wish. Now at the bottom here we can choose the location for some of my tools. Now for me at the moment this search bar is all by itself over on the right hand side. I personally think it's a good idea to bring all your tools together. So from a new user perspective it just makes it that much easier to understand how to use the app. So I'm going to drag this over to move the tools here. And then finally on the last page we can have options to switch between languages, which I don't want at this point. Now we're pretty ready to publish this application now, but before I do that, one final thing I want to show you is Currently we're in express mode, so this is designed to make it as quick and easy to create an application as possible. But if I turn that off, it then gives me a little bit more creative control as to how I set up my map. Now, one of the most significant things is when we look at the sidebar and interactivity, you'll notice we've actually got more options now. So there's far more tools available to us in this non-express mode. So it might be you want to have the option to include a compass. It might be you want to have a base map toggle. It might be you want a list of different base maps to choose from. So if you're thinking, okay, this is a great app, but it's just missing a couple of tools, then please do check the non-express mode settings, because it might be that you find that that's all hidden away in those options. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to publish that, and this is the taking my configuration choices and creating the application I then want to share further down the line. So we'll launch that to see that final view. So this process was very quick, very easy to load data into ArcGIS Online, create a map, visualize that data appropriately, and then share it through a simple web application that will allow your staff or officers to interrogate the data themselves. So they can pan, they can zoom, they can look at the areas where they might be patrolling, and they can understand the distribution of crime in their community. So a really nice way of getting that data out to a much wider community. Now that we've created our first app, I want to show you another approach using dashboards. Now for that, I can go back to my original map and then choose from my app options the dashboard selection. As ever, we need to give this a title and tags, and then I'm going to go into the creation process. Now, creating dashboards is a little bit different from instant apps because we don't have a wizard to talk us through the process. Instead, we just add the various elements to the display that we want to include. So for this fairly simple dashboard, I want to be able to see the total number of crimes across Hertfordshire, and I want to see a breakdown of the crime types. So we'll do the indicator first. So I click to add an element. I choose the location I want to include it, and then I choose an indicator. You can see we've got a wide variety of options to choose from here. I then need to point this control against my data, and you can see it's picked up that we've got 8.1 thousand crimes in this location. All I really need to do now is give it a title. So we'll call this crime count. And that's the name of the control, but we also want to add it as the title so it appears at the top. So quick and easy to configure the display, and then I can adjust the size to reflect my needs. Now I've included that, I now want to look at the crime types. So I'll go plus, we'll put this at the bottom of my count, and we're going to get a profile of types using a pie chart. Again, I choose the crime data, and I want to do grouped values based on that crime type value. So we scroll down and select that, and it will now show me a pie chart that reflects its current configuration, look and feel. Now personally, I find that the labels make it look a little bit cluttered. So the first thing I'm going to do is turn those off. Now this is entirely up to you. If you like to include the labels, then by all means do. Next up, I want to change the color of these slices to reflect the colors that are being used in the map. So they're not dragged through by default, so we need to go through and configure that ourselves. So we've got the various different crime types here, and we can update the color schemes. Now what I'd like to do is make sure I'm using exactly the right color. So for that, we can go back to our map, and if we go to styles and style options, we can see all the colors that are being used for my crime types. So if I choose the valence one here and then select that red, I can copy that exact hex code and paste that into my colors for my pie chart. So now my pie chart's using that very same red we used in the map. Now, for the purpose of this video, I'm not going to go through and update all of these, but hopefully that gives you a feel of how you can better reflect the colors that are used. Under general, we can give this a title as before. And I can click done. So we've now got a nice view of the crime types and the count. Next element I want to include is a title. So I can go to my view options here and I can choose to add a header. I can update the title if I so wish, but I think that's fine for now. And I can adjust some of the colors if I need. Now, if you want to get creative with colors, then you can go into the theme options here. There's lots of different predefined themes. You can also configure these to accurately reflect your corporate branding if you so wish. So what we've got now is we've got a fairly nice, simple, easy to use dashboard, but none of these things are interacting with each other. It would be nice to be able to filter the map based on the selections within this pie chart. At the moment, clicking it does nothing. So if I go into my configuration options here, we've got an option here for actions. So what actions are doing is it means as we interact with this element, we want to update various other features across the rest of the dashboard. So most importantly, I want to filter both the count and the map to reflect my choices here. So I've turned both of those on. I click done. So if we zoom in a little bit, now when I select violence and sexual offences, the map and the count will update to reflect that. So this is why it's really important that you do get those color schemes tied together, because when you click red on the pie chart, you do want to see the red crimes being shown in the map. So that's the configuration of my dashboard done. So I just save that. And then you'll notice at the top here in the URL, it's got hash mode equals edit. If you just delete that, it will show you what the final dashboard looks like. So there you go, quick and easy to create a dashboard to reflect both the map and some of the attribute values through charts and graphs. The final part of this process is to share these applications with my colleagues. So at the moment, these are only shared with me, so no one else will be able to see this content. So I want to talk you through the sharing process. So if I go back to my map, and under here we can go to my content, and we can go back to that folder that we started this whole video in, which now includes a variety of data sets. So we've got the 2 crime data sets we published, we've got an instant app, we've got a map and a dashboard. And what you'll notice here, that at the moment the sharing is only at the owner level. So I'm going to select all these various different elements. I don't need to choose the CSV or the service definition, and I'm going to update the sharing. Now there's various different options here. So at the moment it's owner. If I go to organization, this means that anyone with a login to this account would be able to see this content. If I choose everyone, this makes this data and these maps public. Now you've got to be very careful if you're going to do that. Make sure that it is the sort of thing you do want to share. So think carefully before choosing that option. But there are lots of very good reasons that you might want to share information with the public that helps them understand the work you're doing in the community. And finally, at the bottom, we've got the option to do group sharing, and this allows us to choose from a variety of groups which have got a defined user group to share it with a very defined selection of people. So lots of options that give you creative control as to how you go about sharing your apps with the rest of your community. So I hope you found this video useful. Hopefully it's given you confidence that you can create these applications yourselves and start getting your information out to your wider force. So thanks for now. Hopefully see you next time.